Hello, and welcome to Insightful Conversations with your host, Three Principles practitioner, Adey-Jones. Join her each week as she welcomes some of the world's leading Three Principles teachers and practitioners who share how this understanding has dramatically improved the quality of their lives and the lives of those they work with.
I'm so thrilled to have Jacqueline Hollows with me today. Jacqueline is a social entrepreneur and the founder of Beyond Recovery, a nonprofit organization with a mission to radically review the way we view and treat offending behavior. Her programs have been evidenced by academic research, and Jacqueline is invited to speak about her work at conferences around the world. She's currently writing a book about her journey witnessing transformations. The lads she works with call her Mama J. Welcome, Jacqueline. I'm so excited to have you here with us today. I've been observing you for the last few years doing the amazing work that you do. So I'm so glad, and you're so busy. I'm amazed you made time for me. So.
Well, you do make it late in the evening, so.
I was like, wait a minute, it's 9 o'clock at night for you, so maybe you're not that busy at 9 at night.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear, firstly, how and when you first came across the principles. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. So yeah, how did you? And when did you?
It's a bit of a funny story because I'll start with this. I was in IT and customer services, so in a totally sort of random field. That's what I did all my life. And I had a few personal things happen to me, lots of financial problems. And then my dad, who I was estranged from, got in touch with me, and he had 5 months left to live, and loads and loads of stuff happened all at the same time, like it does sometimes. And my dad passed, and I ended up being the person to clean out his house. And we'd had I had a rocky childhood, lots of trauma, and I'd had a very difficult relationship with him. And so it was really, really strange to be ending up being the person who, sorted his estate out. Not that there was much of an estate, but, and, but I had a very spiritual moment with him when he died. And I didn't know what that was, but I just knew that it was this very strange moment that really impacted me. So I was in a very sort of unusual space. I knew nothing about the Three Principles, by the way, at this point. And I was cleaning out his house, and I came across a newsletter, and I read this newsletter, and I thought, wow, that sounds interesting. And it was from Michael Neill.
Wow.
And after time passed, and I had a look at Michael Neill's website, and I subscribed to his newsletter, and there was just something about the newsletter that kept pulling me, and I ended up going to Supercoach because of my dad. And at the time, Michael Neill wasn't doing fully Three Principles, but there was George and Linda Pransky were one of the weekends. So the first weekend of Supercoach was amazing. It was Bill Cummins, and he was such an amazing man. And I learned such a lot about myself, and there was a lot of forgiveness. And, I realized I was loved, for instance, and lots of, amazing stuff. And then the second weekend happened with Bill and Linda Pransky, and everyone was saying, oh, you really love it. The people who'd been before. I absolutely hated it. I thought they were wacky. It was a cult. I thought this Three Principles stuff that they were banging on about, I really had the most dreadful time. And it was in LA, and I thought I've come all the way to LA to just have a dreadful time. And I just didn't like it. But Michael was doing all sorts of different things. And so I thought, well, I can just ignore that. And then they had masterclasses where the speaker goes online and you join in the webinar, and you have to do it as part of the program. And George was doing a masterclass, and I was dreading it. I was working away from home, and I thought, you know what, I'll log in and then I'd just work while they're talking, but at least I'll, my hours will get counted. And no one else turned up. There was me, one other student, the facilitator, and George.
Wow.
And so I thought, oh, I can't escape. And George and the other two ladies were waxing lyrical about the principles and Sid Banks's recordings, which I really didn't like, and his books. And then George said, Jacqueline, you're very quiet. What did you think of it? And I said, I'm really sorry. I don't want to be rude, but I really didn't like it. And he laughed. He did that. He laughed. I thought, that's strange. And I don't remember what else was said, but I remember George being tickled pink and just really being interested, saying, oh, tell me more about that. And, oh, wow, and laughing and giggling. And the net result was, I thought, well, that's interesting. If it was a cult, you wouldn't have that response. Maybe I need to look at this again. And I just got a bit curious about it. And I wouldn't say that anything major happened to me, but I had the thought, if nothing else worked, I'd use the principles. So if I was with a client and nothing else worked, I'd bring in the principles. Anyway, I finished my coach training and I was working with people, and that's what I did. If nothing else I knew worked, I'd say, oh, well, there's this other thing, and I'd talk to them about the principles, or about the inside out nature of life is what I called it. And then I was just not even really paying much attention, but my life got easier, and I was less stressful and I was going through this terrible time. I lost everything. I lost my house. I lost my car. I lost my job. I lost everything. But I was sort of like, oh, well, something will come along. But I didn't link any of that with what I'd heard. And then I was looking for business. I was going to business networking things. And I met this man who was in recovery from heroin addiction, and he'd been 3 years in recovery using the 12 steps, and he was the most inspirational person I'd ever met in my life. And we were at this business networking breakfast where all these suits, and he was the only person I wanted to talk to. He was so interesting, and I was so inspired by him, and he'd been in prison several times, and I was just like, wow, you've overcome that, and look at you. And he was starting a filmmaking business, and so I ended up volunteering for him and working on his board of directors with him, and just doing whatever I could to help him. And we'd have long conversations about the inside out nature of life. And he thought that it would be really good if I worked with families. But he absolutely did not think I should work with what he called addicts, because, real addicts need the 12 steps. So I was like, yeah, whatever, because, I didn't really think much of it anyway. So I was just experimenting. And I ended up working with him as his support worker at university, and he got a first class honours degree with media comms. And because of that, I ended up meeting all these other people in recovery and who'd been in prison. And I loved them, Dal. I loved them. I just thought they were so interesting and creative and determined and persistent, and there's just everything about them. And I felt at home, like all the struggles that I'd had, my own struggles with alcohol, with my parents with alcohol, with the abuse, all of that, I suddenly felt like I met a tribe that I belonged to. Whereas prior to that, I was like this weird person on the periphery of everything that nobody else really could identify with, I thought. And there were these amazing people that I suddenly resonated with, and I just loved them. And we had these amazing conversations. And what happened was I started to see through them that they were creating their realities and they didn't know it, that they were amazing and they didn't know it. And because I kept seeing them and meeting all these amazing people, eventually I thought, well, if that's true of them, maybe it's true of me. And I thought, oh yeah, everybody has it. So they taught me the principles. And then I had this amazing experience when I volunteered to interview some people for a film. And I walked into a park on a sunny September day in a really scraggy end of Birmingham in England. And I looked at the people in the park in all these different states of recovery and addiction and everything. Ne'er-do-wells, my husband lovingly calls them, all these ne'er-do-wells. And I was filled with love. I just loved them. And I just, in that moment, thought, I don't care what this is. I don't know what it means, but I have to work with these people and let them know they're okay. And I started working with them. I don't even know how, really. I just had this massive feeling. I didn't know it was an insight at the time. I didn't even know what an insight was. And then I followed that. Sounds really simple now, but it was very, staggering at the time.
That is such a beautiful story. Oh my God, I love it so much on so many levels. I just, but yeah, it's amazing how when we've had traumatic childhoods that we don't feel we fit in. And we seek out other people that have gone through trauma too, and we feel we're in our tribe. So I can completely relate to that. But I also love that, and I mentored with George. I know his sense of humor, and that would have really tickled him, I'm sure, having somebody say, I don't get it, I don't see it. So I love that. So wow. So from that point when you walked into that park and you knew that you wanted to work with people, was that the catalyst for Beyond Recovery, or
yeah,
come about?
Yeah. So I didn't really understand at that time how all this was working, but the feeling was so powerful. I didn't really have time to think about it. And literally that within moments of having that feeling, I met this random man behind a tent, which still sounds a bit dodgy now, but it was perfectly okay. And I just bent his ear for hours. And it was almost like I was speaking in tongues. I didn't know what I was saying. And it was just pouring out of me. And he God bless him, he died this year. But he was a recovery activist and very, very, very amazing person, punk rocker, amazing musician. Do you know what a punk rocker is?
Okay. I'm British. I just happen to live in.
Of course you are. Yeah.
I was on the King's Road when they first started in the late 70s.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And a recovery activist, and he was very, very intelligent, and he had all these psychological models, and he just kept throwing stuff at me, and I didn't understand a word of what he said, but I just would listen, and then I would come back to, well, that might all be true, but all I know is, and then I would say something which I guess I would think was profound now, but I didn't even know what I was saying. And he said, "You have got to come and talk to my recovery group." And he got me to Coventry, which is just a little city in England. And he'd got this he called it, it's like a recovery group for any pathway. So there were people from all different pathways of recovery in there. And I went along and I did a talk, which I was petrified at doing public speaking, but I did this talk and they were loving and caring. And then they wanted me to come every week. So I started going every week. Then they wanted mentoring by me. I really didn't know what I was doing, but I just followed whatever was in front of me. But also I just kept going back to, look, I don't know the answers to these things, but I know this. And then I would share whatever it was that I'd really sort of seen. But of course, I then became a student of this understanding because I was seeing it happening in front of me and I was following that. And I walked in one day. I had all these rules, like I wouldn't work with anybody that was less than 5 years in recovery. And he kept smashing my rules to pieces. You know, he'd phone and say, oh, I've got someone I want you to see and she's just got out of rehab. Or, you know, like he's 1 day sober or something. So every rule I had, he broke. And he just kept sending me people. And I did my best and mainly listened. And mainly pointed them to what I could see about them, which is their amazingness. And so they all accepted me. And one day I walked in and a couple of the guys were talking and they said, here she is, beyond recovery. And that was it. I said, that'll do. And I kept the name. And I didn't start the business maybe until 18 months later. I just kept volunteering. I thought that's what I would always do. And then one day I thought maybe I could start a social enterprise and maybe this could turn into, you know, something. I was doing just any job at the time, so that because I wanted to spend most of my time volunteering and working with people. I was just doing like working in an estate agents to pay the rent, you know, that type of thing. And I thought, well, maybe this could be a career, or you know, it could be a business. So that's when I started looking at it as in a slightly different way.
Wow, what an incredible story! Oh my God, I wish I had 2 hours with you today. And I love that you were just allowed yourself to be guided by wisdom, and it wasn't like you had some big plan that was going to happen out there. It was you were just taking one step at a time, and it was being revealed to you where you needed to go and what you needed to do, and clearly what you needed to say as well.
Yeah,
it resonated.
yeah, 100%. And you know what, Del, that's still the case. I get carried away with my thoughts about how it's all going to work out and what I'm going to do and where it's going to go, and then I get shown that's not how it's going to work. And many times over the last, well, that's 7 years, but over even the last 5 years of the business, many times, including obviously lockdown, and even just this week, many times I've gone, okay, what then? I see myself as, sounds a bit woo-woo, but I see myself as a channel, as a vessel, and I try to be the best listener to allow whatever it is that needs to come through me and go where that goes. And when I do that, really random, unforeseen things happen, and I have 100% faith in it, and I go with it. And when I don't do that, which happens from time to time, I find myself pushing water up a hill.
Yeah.
And at some point I recognized, like, this is really difficult. What am I doing wrong? Oh, okay, I'm following what I think should happen and not letting it unfold.
Oh, that's so brilliant, and it's so true, and it's definitely not woo woo to me. It's exactly how I like to live life. And I'm not saying that. I always say that, there's that part of me that doesn't even trust my own thinking. So I'm really good at letting wisdom take the reins and just direct me, because I just have had so much experience that I could never ever come up with what is unfolding right in front of me.
Yeah.
So that's so beautiful. So I'd love to hear. I know that you work in you have programs you have within the Beyond Recovery, and I know you hold weekly meetings and with the guys. So I'd love it if you could share one of the stories of transformation, because I know you're also working on a book about stories of transformation. So share one of the stories that is going to be in your book, or that you would like to share.
When I started working in prison, I had the idea that we were going to be working with people in recovery, and I did start on that route for the first couple of years. But soon it became apparent that really, first of all, that anybody could come to the program, but more importantly, that the people that I love working with the most are the hardest to reach people. So the people that have given up and everyone else has given up on, that have probably a career of being a criminal, or many years, if not a lifetime, of addiction, often mental health issues, often trauma. So really the people that are beyond help, people might say, they're my favorite people. And they are so amazing, because they come in and they are so skeptical. They've done everything. So there's a guy, Joe, we'll call him, and he came to, at the time we were running these massive groups. We were doing a little experiment where we thought, is it true that you can only have like 12 people in the room? Could you have 40? What would that be like? And we were running these massive groups in the chapel in prison with the guys. So the guys were running the groups with us. They were co-facilitating. And there's these two fellas were in there, and this little Joe is a lifer, so he's in prison for life for killing somebody, and he was so skeptical. He was just like, look, I've done it all, I've seen it all, nothing ain't gonna work, blah blah blah. And I said, oh yeah, okay, that's fine, because of course that happens all the time, and look at me, I was the biggest skeptic. Mm-hmm. And he said, but my mate's in here and he's actually leading the group. He was one of our boys who's leading the group. So I'll hang around, and that's all. I'm just doing it for him. So we had this great big massive circle of all these 40 guys, and either me or one of the facilitators and two of the boys at the front leading. And he just sat there. He's a little scrappy guy, and he sat there with his arms crossed. And at the first break, the guy leading it said, "Look, hang in there, mate. I know it sounds, I know it sounds completely wacky, and I've been there myself. But just hang it. Come back this afternoon. Don't give it up yet. Just hang in there." And he said, "All right then." And he came back. And at the end of the day, just one day, and this is a guy with 19 years in prison, and most of the 19 years he spent in the what we call the block, in the CSU, the care and support unit, which is the segregation unit. So that's his favourite place to go, or was. And to get there, he would smash his cell up, fight officers, obviously had addictions, so he was always on drugs and naughty. When he wanted to go to another prison, he'd just smash everything up and then he'd get transferred to another prison. So he'd been in hundreds of prisons and hadn't had a visit from his family for about 10 years or something. And at the end of one day, and he was sat straight opposite us, and he said, well, I don't normally speak. And then he just spoke for about 10 minutes. And he just poured out all of this angst about himself and what he'd been doing to himself. And we all listened. And he said, oh, I don't know what to do. And he just kept pouring out all this stuff. And then he was tearful. And he was going, what are you doing to me? What are you doing? I don't understand. What are you doing to me? And he said, I think I just need, time out. So someone took him to one side and, sort of had a chat with him and whatever. I said, do come back tomorrow. Please come back tomorrow. Something's happening to you and you're safe. And everything that's happening to you is maybe a bit scary, but it's okay. It's all okay. And the way he put it was like, there's some rewiring happening and that's causing some emotional outpouring, but don't be scared, it's all good. So he's like, oh, okay then, and he nearly didn't come back, but the officer on his wing the next day, he said, come on, Joe, you're back to group. And he said, I'm not going back. It's horrible, I don't like it, I'm not going back. And he said, oh no, I think you do want to go back. I've seen a change in you from just one night. And they're only out of their cells for about 2 hours by the time they go back to the wing. So he came back. And long story short, at the end of that 3 days, we used to run 3-day groups. At the end of that 3 days, he'd got in touch with his family, found out that he knew he had an 18-year-old daughter that he'd only ever seen once. His 18-year-old daughter was coming to visit him. He'd arranged for that. She was pregnant. And he'd put himself forward as a lifer representative on the wing so that he could help other lifers. That was just at the end of those 3 days. So we've carried on working with him, obviously, over the last couple of years. And the shifts in him have been amazing. He ended up with the best job in the prison, like a repair job, going around putting windows in, one of the most trusted people. He has moments. He has his bad moments. He doesn't smash anything up anymore, but he's earned such a lot of trust with the officers that they now help him and support him through those times. He's now got the ability to move to an open prison, which basically they'd said he was going to die in prison, and he'd sort of just given himself over to die in prison. He's got 3 grandchildren now. He sees his family all the time. They all come on visits. I mean, just amazing. Just totally transformed from someone who was literally on the scrap heap to someone who's got an amazing future ahead of him, and is an incredibly compassionate man, and who has been in group. He often will go to sleep in group. He just likes to nod off, and he has been in group, and the minute someone needs help, he wakes up and he's there for them. Just amazing. I wouldn't say that he's got a deep understanding of what the principles are, but the shift, the spiritual shift that's happened to him is doing its own work.
Yeah. Well, oh God, that's so incredible. And I'm sitting here getting all teary-eyed, and what a beautiful story. And just like you said, he might not be able to articulate what he's seen and what he's experiencing. But clearly he's been touched by something so profound for him to have such a shift in his life like that. And yeah, how what a blessing to his daughter and his grandchildren, and to all those people that are struggling and in prison and need his support. That's just beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, we unfortunately are sort of coming up on our time here. So I'd love you to just mention about your Wisdom Entrepreneur. You do a webinar where people can join and learn a bit more. And then also your website so that people know how to contact you.
Okay, so I'm really easy to contact. So the website's beyond-recovery.co.uk. But if you Google Jacqueline Hollows, I come up everywhere. So I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all of those things. People should be easily find me. And Wisdom Entrepreneurs is a weekly free webinar for anyone who wants to join the conversation. It's on a Monday night at 6 p.m. UK time. And now it's I co-host, or guests of Beyond Recovery co-host with the boys. So you usually get one on there, if not two or three. And it's like, how I would describe it is like a group. So we run group online. People can share if they want to. They can be quiet if they want to. The conversation, like last night's conversation, was about security. But the conversation can be about anything, and everyone is welcome, no matter what stage they're at or anything. And it's very, very informal. And we do other stuff as well, but you can find all about that on the website.
And I've been part of that the webinar, the Wisdom Entrepreneur webinar that you do, and it was lovely to meet all the boys and you. But tell us a little bit. We've got a couple of minutes. Tell us about the Impact program, because I know you've got that one coming up. The 10 weeks.
Oh yeah. Oh, thank you. Yes. So we were running a program where people who wanted to make social change would come into prison and learn with the guys. Obviously, we can't do that at the moment with lockdown. So we've moved it to online. It's 10 weeks. It's about an hour and a half a week, and a little bit homework. And we'll be working with at least two of the guys will be working with me teaching on that program. And we're going to mix some people from the community with the people who want to make social change. So, sometimes some of the guys who are coming out of prison, and sometimes some of their wives and things. So that's what the program's going to be like. And what's powerful about that is that those two different sets of people get to see they're the same. And they get to see that, so the people in the community get to see that people who look like they've got all life figured out have the same problems as they do. And the other way around, the mentors, if you like, get to see that how wise these people in the community are. And it should be, we've piloted it twice now, and it should be very powerful. So we'd love people to come along and ask about that if they'd like to.
Wonderful. Gosh, I love that. And I love what you've said about that, we're all the same. I always say, there but for the grace of God go I, because I did some crazy stuff in my younger years that I could have completely ended up in prison for. So I think it's sometimes just the luck of the draw. And I think that we can have compassion and love for each other and know that we are all the same, and we all struggle the same. We're all human. We're spiritual beings having a human experience, but boy, that human experience can be tough sometimes. So yeah.
Sliding door moment.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, lovely. I hope to see. We're doing Viva together. I saw you at Viva last year. I wish we were there together in Spain again, but we're doing it online. And then hopefully next year I'll see you at the conferences.
Yay. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's listening.
All right, lovely. Thank you. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you're interested in learning more about my coaching and mentoring packages, please reach out to me at Adey-Jones@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you.